listened. I knew if I kept dropping the hints, and then it would happen. As was brought up yesterday by our friend in the corner about sometimes how the qualities of the 7 factors of enlightenment are represented in a sequence. I thought I'd speak a little bit about that way of figuring things, not hoping to create more confusion, but just different ways of reflecting upon these same qualities and how they appear in the teachings and how they are useful in our lives. Probably one of the most well-known locations, places in the teachings where the Buddha speaks about the 7 factors of enlightenment in this way is in the discourse on mindfulness of breathing, the Anapanasati Sutta. And this is Sutta number 118 in the middle length discourses. There's some sign language going on here. So and of the key meditation teachings in the Theravada scriptures, the 2 main suttas that are referred to over and over again and are probably the most essential resources for meditation guidance are the Anapanasati Sutta, the discourse on mindfulness of breathing, and then the other one is the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana Sutta. And that appears in a couple of different places. In the middle length discourses, Sutta number 10, and then in the long discourses, the Digha Nikaya as well. So they're almost identical. The one in the long discourses has got a little bit more added about the Four Noble Truths. But anyway, so the discourse on the mindfulness of breathing is extraordinarily helpful and important guidance. And within that, the Buddha describes how the practice of mindfulness of breathing supports the development of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and how the 4 foundations of mindfulness support and lead to the fulfillment of the 7 factors of enlightenment, and how the fulfillment of the 7 factors of enlightenment leads to deliverance, knowledge and vision of deliverance. So there's in that particular teaching, there's a very clear and well articulated description of how an accessible and practical meditation practice like mindfulness of breathing can help to develop these different dimensions of our spiritual life. So I thought I'd begin this evening by talking a little bit about that. And again, I'm aware that some of you are old hands. You've probably done many classes or sessions on these kind of teachings, that mindfulness of breathing and the foundations of mindfulness are very familiar territory. And others of you might be thinking, the what? The who? I didn't quite catch that. What's that about? If you're very new to this whole business. So I thought I'd speak in a way to address both the people who are less experienced and people also who have more experience, and try to put things across in a way that's useful for everyone. Mindfulness of breathing is one of the essential meditation practices in our monasteries in the West and in Thailand. When people come and ask for meditation instruction, it's almost invariably the first kind of meditation that we give guidance in. Ajahn Chah, similarly, when people came to ask for meditation instruction, mindfulness of breathing would be what he introduced people to from the start. And so this is because it's praised by the Buddha, and also the Buddha said that this is mindfulness of breathing is a pleasant abiding, that he practiced it himself throughout his life. So it's not like, even as a fully enlightened Buddha, incapable of suffering, you wouldn't bother to do a basic meditation practice, but rather the Buddha used to practice mindfulness of breathing long after his full enlightenment, simply because it was an enjoyable and useful thing to be doing. It was a pleasant, delightful abiding for the mind, a pleasant way of giving the mind an object to rest upon. So the mindfulness of breathing is helpful. It's the breath is something that we don't have to invent. We don't have to remember it. The body breathes on its own. So it's a natural physical function. It's not personal. I can guarantee all of our bodies are breathing. There's nobody who gave up breathing for Lent, right? Well, the Jewish equivalent of say, practicing on austerity for a while. None of us can give up breathing. We all breathe all the time. And the breath, even though it can be subject to personal will, you can decide to breathe in deeply or breathe in shallow or breathe quicker or slower. Fundamentally, it's a physiological function that follows its own rhythms and patterns. And yet, even though it's ever present, it's not very interesting. Even though our life depends on it, most of us go through our days without noticing, hey, I'm breathing. Last year when I went to Mount Kailash, and it's about 5,000 or 6,000 meters high, the air is very, very thin, so you do think a lot, hey, I'm breathing, because air is very thin and it's hard to breathe there. But at our ordinary, customary altitude, then breath is unremarkable. It doesn't grab our attention. So it's a useful meditation object in that it's not intrinsically interesting. So we have to rouse energy to pay attention to it. We've got to bring our attention to it because it won't leap up and grasp our attention unless we have a lung disease, or we have blocked nose, or the air is very thin for some reason. That the breath is not something that is exciting or interesting or attention grabbing. So therefore, it requires a certain intentionality and a rousing of energy to attend to it. The breath is also a calming rhythm. When we bring attention to it, it's something that moves quite slowly in respect to the speed that our thoughts and our feelings move at, so that the breath is something that naturally helps to bring a quality of calmness and settledness within us. So there are many useful aspects to mindfulness breathing. But then to outline briefly how the Buddha speaks of this in the Anapanasati Sutta, and probably Tor and Itama have done classes on this here in the past, I'm guessing?
More the Satipatthana.
More Satipatthana. Well, they're very closely related, because the Buddha, as he describes mindfulness of breathing, he relates it immediately, very directly to the foundations of mindfulness. So if some of you are wondering, foundations of mindfulness, what's that? I've heard about mindfulness, but what are these foundations? So the Buddha spoke about 4 different dimensions, or 4 different areas where we can develop the quality of mindfulness. It's like, in a way, slicing the pie into 4 pieces, or breaking the loaf into 4 chunks. So, and this you can think of as almost like if you have a magnifying glass or a microscope, turning up the magnification, so you're looking closer and closer and closer at the way things are. So the most basic level, then you have mindfulness of the body, and so that the discourse on mindfulness of breathing, it speaks about just the movement of the body in the process of the breath, and so that the first level of developing mindfulness is called Kayanupasana, or mindfulness of the body. Kaya is body, the mindfulness of the body. So then the next level in is feeling, sensation, Vedana, and that means not feeling as in moods and ideas, but feeling particularly as in sensation. So that it's feeling is a mental event, but it's directly related to the body. So that's the next level, is Vedana, or feeling. Then the next level in is Chitta, or the mental realm, so mindfulness of moods and mind states. So what's called Chittanupasana, or mindfulness, or the investigation, the reflection upon mind states and moods. And so that's, say, the mental realm, but not so directly connected to the body. So your memories, or your thoughts, or your feelings of sadness or excitement, there might be some physical aspect to that, but it's not directly related to the body. And then the most fundamental level is called Dhammanupasana. So sometimes this is translated as mindfulness of mind objects, because the word Dhamma, usually with a small d, can refer to mind objects, objects of mind. But it can also refer to seeing things in terms of Dhamma, or seeing things in terms of their fundamental reality. And so many scholars over the centuries, I'm sure numerous PhDs have been written about, is it Dhamma with a big D or Dhamma with a small d? I'm not sure whether in Hebrew you have capital letters and small letters, probably not. But well, the way it's distinguished in Roman script is that Dhamma with a big D generally means the Buddha's teaching or the fundamental reality of things. Dhamma with a small d means mental phenomena, or any kind of phenomenon, a mind object. So the hot debates have gone on over the centuries, the years, saying it means Dhamma with a small d. It means mind objects. No, it doesn't. It means Dhamma as in the Buddha's teachings. But I'll speak a little bit about how the way it's expressed, particularly in the Anapanasati Sutta, it says to me, in my humble opinion, that it's referring to seeing things in terms of reality, seeing things in terms of truth. So, and if following the analogy of turning up the microscope, if you have the sort of the body level and the feeling level and the mind level, and this is like the sort of subatomic level of the very fabric of experience, and the most fundamental, basic level of reality. So Dhammanupasana is seeing things in terms of their fundamental nature. And in Larry Rosenberg's excellent little book on mindfulness of breathing, which I think is just called Mindfulness of Breathing, he divides these up very helpfully using 4 simple phrases. So the first section of the book is called Breathing with the Body, the second section of the book is called Breathing with Feeling, the third section of the book is called Breathing with the Mind, and the fourth section is called Breathing with Wisdom. And so that I feel that particularly in the Anapanasati Sutta, that last section, that the fourth section is pointing to the development of mindfulness, specifically conjoined with the reflective faculty and looking at primarily at the quality of change, at anicca, at the fluid nature of experience. So that in the Anapanasati Sutta, then I won't go into too much detail this evening, but the Buddha first of all describes how you can relate to the breath just in terms of the body, of the kaya, of the physical aspect of the breath, and so that knowing the body, knowing the breath when it's long, knowing the breath when it's short, knowing the breath. And it's different natural modulations. And some people give instructions with mindfulness of breathing, encouraging a controlling of the breath or breathing in particular ways. But Ajahn and Ajahn Amaro, my teachers, would always encourage just letting the breath come and go at its own natural pace. And that also seems to be implied in the Buddha's teachings on this. So it's not like you should breathe long and then you should breathe short as sort of different specific practices, but more if the breath is long, no, this is a long breath. If the breath happens to be short, no, this is a short breath. You know, just like as you're walking along, you realize, oh, I'm just walking slowly. My steps are short, or oh, I'm really striding out. My steps are long. In exactly the same way, it's noticing how the body is, say, carrying out the function of breathing at that particular time, and then knowing the breath as a particular aspect of the body, and then then consciously using the breath to help the body to settle, to calm down. So that's the first aspect of using the first foundation of mindfulness with the breath, so that it's like knowing the breath, whether it's long or short, and then appreciating the physical quality of the breathing, and then using the breath to help the body to settle. Then in terms of feeling, the Buddha encourages the use of the breath in relationship to the realm of sensation, and knowing the feeling of the breath as an aspect of the feeling realm, the mental realm as well, and then using the breath to help to calm down the mental faculty. The third section, the way that the Buddha encourages us to use the breath in terms of the citta, the mental function, is to use the breath for arousing the quality of piti or rapture, and then the quality of sukha, contentment, and then knowing the mental world, and then also liberating the mind. So developing rapture, developing sukha, contentment, then knowing the mental world and liberating the mind. And then the fourth one, oh, you don't have to remember all of this, I'm just sort of zipping through without a lot of explanation, just to let you know how he speaks about it. So then the last one, if I'm remembering this all correctly, the Buddha encourages knowing the breath in terms of change. So like, so in the Dhammanupassana, the reflection on the breath in terms of wisdom, or in terms of dhammas, then the first aspect is knowing the breath just as a changing quality, seeing the quality of change in the breath, and then the reflecting upon the breath, looking at the quality of viraga or dispassion, of that kind of cooling down of attitude, then of cessation, nirodha, and then lastly of vosagga or abandonment. So using the qualities of the breath to support the seeing change, and then the qualities of non-attachment, letting go and non-attachment. So that's a lot. I mean, you could spend a whole week just on these different divisions of the breath, and using the breath to support the four foundations of mindfulness. But just to simplify that all a little bit, what we can see is we can relate to the physical quality of the breath. We can relate to the sensation qualities of the breath. We can use the breath to help support wholesome and bright states of mind, and then we can use the breath to help us to see into the nature of mind and into the nature of experience, and to support the development of insight. Is that making sense? We'll have plenty of opportunity for questions and discussion after. So then, when the Buddha then says this is the way that the mindfulness of breathing supports the four foundations of mindfulness, how it leads to the fulfillment of the four foundations of mindfulness, so that each of those, and again you can see them as a sequence, starting with the body, then feeling, then mind states, and then the fundamental nature of mind. But you can also see them as working together, because the body is still here, feelings are still happening, the mind states are still happening, all of those things. You don't just sort of do mindfulness of the body and then after you've done the body you move on to feeling. It's not the way that it works. So that those the investigation and the development of mindfulness of those four different layers, they work together and function in relationship to each other. So then the way that then the Buddha describes how the four foundations of mindfulness and support the seven factors of enlightenment, which is the main bit I was getting onto, is he says how when the quality of the development of mindfulness around the body, around the kaya-anupasana, when that mindfulness is fully developed and fulfilled, then that aspect of mindfulness, then that supports the development of investigation, so that the mindfulness makes the mind brighter and clearer, and so then the capacity to investigate and to explore the nature of the present moment is increased. With that quality of investigation, then that rouses more energy, that brightens and enlivens the whole system, so more virya is brought in. With being virya, the energy, then that interacts with the mental realm again, and then rapture, piti, arises, that quality of joyfulness, rapture. Then with the arising of rapture, that leads to the quality of tranquility, that rapture, when it's well integrated and balanced, then it ripens in a tranquility of body and a tranquility of mind. As yesterday I was talking about how when the piti gets out of balance, then you find yourself agitated or restless, but when it's well integrated, then that leads to a calming of the body and a calming of the mind. That passaddhi, then, when the body is tranquil, the mind is tranquil, that supports the quality of samadhi, or it's when the body is relaxed and the mind is relaxed, when there is contentment, when there is physical ease, then it's quite simple and natural for the mind to concentrate. So that it's just like if you are happy being here at Bhavana House right now, you're not thinking about where else you could be. Maybe you are thinking, well, I could have done something much better with this evening. This is all way too much. Too much information. I wish I was somewhere else. But if you are content with being here, if you're settled, if you're content, then it's easy to focus on what's going on. If you're unsettled and you're discontent, then the mind is racing here, there and everywhere. So that it's like if you're holding the camera in a steady way, if the camera is steady, it's not difficult to take a clear picture. If the camera is jostling around, then it's difficult to take a clear picture. So the Buddha in numerous teachings pointed out how if the body is relaxed and there is a quality of physical ease, mental ease, then it's when there is that contentment, so as he said, the contented mind is easily concentrated. So when there's concentration, when there's samadhi, then leads to upekkha, or the aspect of equanimity. And then, so that's how, for each of the four foundations, if it's mindfulness of the body, then it leads to the ripening of the seven factors of enlightenment based on that mindfulness of the body. As the mindfulness of feeling develops, but that mindfulness of feeling then causes that whole sequence to develop and strengthen. Mindfulness of mind states and moods also helps the whole system with the sati of mind states being established, then that helps that whole sequence to be developed all the way through to equanimity and samadhi, and lastly, when the development of the Dhammanupassana, the development of mindfulness of mind objects, or the mindfulness of the fundamental structure of experience is established, then that again leads that whole sequence to a full ripening and a fulfillment. So when I've been using a lot of different words and terminology to describe this, but when this is all brought together in meditation, then it's not quite so wordy or involved, but it's as we work with the development of mindfulness, we use a method like the mindfulness of breathing. We feel and know from a direct experience how all those things, those different aspects, work together. How, yes, there's the body, and yes, there are feelings. Yes, there are mind states. Yes, there is the capacity to be awake and to look into the nature of experience. There, all these things are present together. They work together. And so, even though we use a lot of words and concepts to describe that, the actuality of the experience and working with it is far more sort of direct and immediate. So that say focusing upon that last of the four foundations, then it hinges upon the perception of anicca. So in that last section of the a particular section of the Anapanasati Sutta, then when the Buddha points out when somebody wants to develop the Dhammanupassana, the contemplation of Dhamma, then it starts off with looking at the quality of anicca, of change. So that, in a sense, is where vipassana meditation is grounded, or is based. That the more that we are able to say the mindfulness is well established, the attention is focused on the present moment, and if we look at the quality of change, this is what brings about the arising of wisdom. This is what helps for the realization of deliverance, of liberation, to be actualized, to be made real. And so that when we are establishing, and again, many of you have probably been doing meditation for years and years, some of you, but it might be quite new. But what we're doing with all of this process is essentially using the mindfulness of breathing to help the attention to stay in the present moment. So it's not that the breath is somehow sort of special or sacred or unique, but we're just using the breath as a way of flagging the present moment. It's like, this is now. this like a flag on a golf course. I understand you've only got one golf course in Israel, so it's not a good example. I was in the States for a long time, so they've got golf courses everywhere. Gadi was telling me there's only one golf course in Israel today. But, yeah. On the very rare golf courses that we have here, you stick a flag in the hole, say that's where the hole is, that's what you're aiming for. And so the breath is used simply as a flag for the present moment. So as we are trying to train our mind to attend to the present, then if we say, if we've made the resolution, I wish to attend to the breath, to focus on the feeling of the breath, then having established, that's the flag to aim for. So then if I'm thinking about what I've got to do next week, or what happened last week, or the conversation that I had yesterday morning over breakfast with Eitan, then, oh, that's not my breath, that's a memory of a conversation. That's not the flag, I've drifted from the flag, okay, go back to the breath, that's the flag I'm aiming for. So that it's simply a way of helping the attention to be grounded in the present moment. Although there's different aspects of using mindfulness, so using the breath to help settle the body, using the breath to help settle the mind, using the breath to gladden the mind. So in that process also, it's not just calming the mind, also gladdening the mind, brightening the mind, and rousing those wholesome qualities. That's all to do with helping the attention to rest in the present moment. And the more that the body is relaxed, the more the mind is relaxed, the more that there is brightness and clarity, then the attention will rest more easily and happily in the present moment. Whether we hear a sound, whether we have a feeling, a sensation in the body, whether we hear our phone humming when we were supposed to turn it off, and we're thinking, oh dear, I forgot to switch my phone off. Okay, well that's just a sound, leave it for the time being. We can leave everything aside and bring the attention just to the present. Then that's what the focusing on the single object of the breath is for. And as the Buddha articulates in the sutta, then when that mindfulness of the present is well established, then we use that. We can use the quality of the breath to help lead us into the reflection on impermanence, on change. Not just the change of the breath, but also the change of all things. So that we're using the rhythm of the breath, the changing quality of the breath, as a gateway to lead us into looking at change everywhere. Change in the sounds that we're hearing, change in the other feelings of the body, change in the different flashes of memory or imagination or pieces of music that wander through the mind, that the mind is seeing it simply in terms of change. And then that seeing of change then is developed to lead on to these other qualities, viraga, dispassion. It's just saying, well, it's changing. It might be exciting, but it's changing, so it's going to go. So don't get excited. Just let go of it. So viraga, nirodha, cessation. It's ending. Anything that's come into being is in a state of change. It's also dissolving. It's ending. And vosagga is abandonment or relinquishment. So in a way, it's almost training ourselves not even to pick things up, not to grasp hold in the first place, so that when that quality is fully developed, then there's not even a picking up, so that then we have to let go. It's just a non-entanglement. So that's my particular rendering of vosagga. Vosagga is not a very common Pali word, but it usually translated as abandonment or relinquishment, but I kind of like non-entanglement. It's a long word. I can't quite come up with something shorter, but it's like not being, not picking things up, not getting wrapped up, not getting entangled, like caught up in a knotted string. So when we speak about insight meditation, vipassana, then at the beginning what we're doing is, as the mind is able to rest in the present moment, then you find that the stronger the mindfulness is, the more settled the body and the mind are, then it takes less and less effort for the attention to stay with the present. It's not like something I have to do, that being established, this is where the mind is settled. And so then, at that point, as is the usual instruction with vipassana meditation, you can let go of paying attention to the breath as a particular object, but instead to open the field of attention and just look at the quality of change of all objects. So this, in that sutta, as I like to reflect on it, you've got the Buddha is spelling out how we use the qualities of the breath to lead into the development of insight meditation. So then we are, as I think I was saying the other day, how you are drawing your attention away from whether it's inside or outside. You just say, is it changing? Is it pleasant or painful? Well, is it changing? Is it something that is familiar or unfamiliar? It doesn't matter. Is it changing? And so you're deliberately drawing the attention out of the content of an experience to look at the process of experience itself. So then that this is called developing the perception of change, or developing the perception of anicca. You can also, the most usual way that Ajahn Amaro would speak of this is, whereas anicca is sort of describing the objective quality, like that thing is changing, the way that we experience the quality of change is, on the subject side, is uncertainty. I don't know what it's going to change into. So that, yes, that thing is changing, that's its quality is change, but the felt sense of change is uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what that thing is going to change into. So on the subject side, you can say anicca is, means uncertainty. And so Ajahn Amaro, more often than not, when he talked about anicca, he would use the Thai term mai nair. Mai tiang means impermanent or changing. Mai nair means uncertain. So he would more often than not, you can't really put a number on it, but say 80% of the time he would say mai nair, it's not certain, because that's the felt experience of change. So if we are looking at the use of say a method like mindfulness of breathing, then during the course of the meditation, also during the course of the day, just the simple changing of the breath and that constant rhythm can help us to remember anicca, can help us to remember everything is changing. Just as we don't know quite what the next breath is going to be like, we don't know what the next moment is going to be like. So that a simple and direct, tangible practice like mindfulness of breathing becomes a very direct and usable doorway to help us to open up to that quality of uncertainty. Now, to the ego, uncertainty is a threat. Like the habits of self-view and ego-centered thinking relate to uncertainty with fear. Like there's a sense of threat. I don't know what's going to happen next, therefore tighten up. And so that change, uncertainty, has a quality of danger and threat when we relate to life from self-view, from sakkaya ditthi, ego-centered thinking. But when those ego-centered habits are let go of, then that quality of change, rather than being a threat, is experienced far more in terms of an openness and a quality of liberation. So that, again, Ajahn Amaro would describe that the reflection on anicca, he say, this is the quality or the standard of the noble ones. You know, if you're a wise person will always see that everything is anicca, not a neurotic or a paranoid person, but a wise person will always see that everything is uncertain. All things are uncertain, and that in terms of the development of mindfulness through your everyday lives, and sort of developing wisdom in relationship to your work, or your families, or life in the world, then the conscious development of this perception of anicca is extremely helpful. So it's yesterday evening I was suggesting this practice of saying "so" to all of your different mind states. You can, in exactly the same way, you can develop a simple reflection on anicca in relationship to your experience. And another of these very, very simple, direct reflections that Ajahn Amaro would encourage was to just ask yourself, is that a sure thing? When you're making a plan, or I was having a discussion with someone the other day, even just when you're writing an email, just to say, rather than "I will meet you at Bhavana House," like you say, "I plan to meet you at Bhavana House." There's that simple catching of, "Oh, I will. Well, are you sure?" And just to take a simple standard like that, it's a very practical and tangible thing. When you're writing an email or you're making a phone call, "I'll see you on Sunday." Like, put up the little signals. Well, I plan to see you on Sunday. I plan to be at Bhavana House, but who knows? I'm sure there's a few people who planned to be here this evening that didn't make it, or maybe some of you made it and didn't plan to be here. So, when we are, say, looking at the the 7 factors of enlightenment, even though it's a sort of a long list of longish list of things, essentially what they're talking about is the supporting the development of living wisely and living in terms of insight and making that insight alive, developing that insight in a live and clear way, so that the more that those qualities are established, then the more that we live, and that vipassana is not just a thing that you do on the cushion once a day or on a retreat, but it's more an ongoing way of relating to the inner world and the outer world, and so it's about the development of wisdom. And as it says in that sutta, when the 7 factors of enlightenment are brought to fulfillment, then they lead to the, if I'm remembering correctly, the knowledge and vision of deliverance. That they ripen in viveka, viraga, nirodha, vosagga. So viveka as in seclusion or non-attachment. That they lead us to a quality of non-entanglement and ability to live in the world without being pressured and burdened by the world. Now the word viveka is an interesting one, and the Buddha uses in terms of describing that the development or the fulfillment of the factors of enlightenment. Viveka, it means seclusion or retreat. So like in the Thai language you say, I'm going to go vivek for a week. I'm going to go on retreat for a week. So the word they use for going on a retreat, like a meditation retreat. And so to give you another list, there's 3 different grades of viveka. Also, I know I'm talking to a room full of Jewish people, and we do like lists and kind of categorization. And, I'm only a quarter Jewish, but I think I've got more than my fair share of list-making conditioning. And so categorization, list-making, it really fits this kind of orderly say intricate patterns that are, at least I find, very helpful, enjoyable. And so there are 3 levels of viveka. So the first one is kaya viveka, or physical seclusion. So going on retreat, having your cabin in the woods that you go and sit in. So physical retreat. So taking yourself away from things, from people. Kaya viveka. Then the second level of viveka is chitta viveka, which means an internal seclusion. And just to tell a little story about this and why Chitta Viveka is the name of the first forest monastery that we established in England, was when Ajahn Amaro first came from Thailand in 1977, and they were living in this little house in London, 4 monks in this little vihara on Haverstock Hill in London, the same one with the noisy music across the road. And so it was pretty claustrophobic and difficult. And so Ajahn Amaro kept finding himself thinking, I want to go back to Thailand, I hate it here, and London's so noisy and all these people are bothering us all the time, and I can't practice, and it's stinky underground. And, I don't like this, I want to go home, I want to go back to Wat Pah Pong. And so he heard this little whiny voice in his mind and thought, do I want to put you in charge of my life? But he could hear that, and he's a very reflective person, so he thought, well, what's going on here? We've been invited to come to England. If you're interested in meditation and you're interested in Buddhism, how many Buddhists, and you're interested in traditional monasticism, how many Buddhist monastics are there here in Britain teaching meditation? 1. So where are people going to go if that's what you're interested in? Where are people going to go? They're going to go to the Hampstead Vihara because he's the only monk who was in the country and who had experience with meditation. So he thought, well, we've been invited here and we're here, so of course people show up. So who's the fool? I'm here like the sort of the one flower for all the bees to go to, and I'm getting annoyed by the bees. Well, this is really stupid because I shouldn't expect it to be any different. And they also saw how his mind had got fixated on physical seclusion, and so he began to reflect on how the Buddha said, well, there is physical seclusion, but actually that's the most rudimentary, and that more important and significant and refined than that is the internal seclusion, citta viveka. And so he realized that he just got locked onto the idea of peace comes from being alone in my kuti in the forest, and I don't want to be bothered with all these people. But instead, he said, well, maybe I should just consciously develop citta viveka, internal seclusion instead. And so he started to use a kind of an inner listening. He'd noticed that in the background of his hearing, when things were very quiet, he'd hear a continuous, high-pitched ringing tone in the background of his hearing. Particularly, London was a kind of town that stops at night, so after 11 at night, all the buses and the cars would tend to quieten down. And he noticed when he was sitting in the quiet of the night, he'd hear this continuous inner ringing sound. And he started to use that as a meditation object. And so and then he realized, well, I could develop the internal citta viveka around that. Just be walking down the street, sitting on the underground, sitting in the middle of the English Sangha Trust business meetings, and the world is right here, but I can also be, in a sense, disentangling from it by listening to this inner sound at the same time. I'm here, I'm present, I'm paying attention, but also here's this sound reminding me not to entangle, not to get caught up. And he had such a strong insights around that and found it so beneficial that when they were actually given the forest to go and live in it, then he called that place Citta Viveka. That was why Chithurst. It wasn't because of the name Chithurst, that he had the name Citta Viveka before they moved to the village of Chithurst, which is kind of interesting. And there's even a Chitta's cottage in the village, Cittas, in the village. And Chitta is the name of a local goddess, sort of pre-Roman deity of the local area. That's how the village got its name. So that citta viveka, internal seclusion, is a sense of being in the presence of the sense world, the people and things and activity, but not entangled with it, not caught up. And then the third layer is upadhi viveka, U-P-A-D-H-I, upadhi viveka, and that's seclusion from the defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion. So that's a whole deeper layer of insight, whereby not only is there a sense of disentanglement from activity and from perceptions and thoughts and feelings, but there's the freeing of the heart from any afflictive or destructive reactive patterns in relationship to that. So, in a way, a simple way of talking about it is upadhi viveka is there being no landing place for any greed, hatred, or delusion. There's no place for those qualities to land. No, there's nothing that can get caught up in aggression or in craving or in delusion. The heart is free from the impact. There's no landing place for any of those deluded or destructive qualities. So when we are talking about this, say, using this insight, developing the seven factors of enlightenment, what I'd like to suggest, and I was sort of alluding to a bit yesterday evening, is how we can, in a way, sort of shrink it down into very simple packages, and using something, remembering to apply the recollection of anicca, of impermanence or uncertainty. This is, rather than trying to sort of, while you're driving along, trying to remember what the fifth factor of enlightenment was, whether you've got enough of it, just to be reflecting. This is in a state of change. This is in a state of uncertainty. I don't know if that light is still going to be green when I get to it. I don't know if there's going to be a parking space. I don't know what that person's going to be feeling when I meet them. I don't know whether I'm going to get to the meeting on time. I don't know. And as I said, when we cultivate that quality of anicca from a place of wisdom, rather than from a place of self-view, then what we experience is liberation. It's like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. And the felt sense is one of freedom or of mystery. And so that, as the Buddha said in the Meghiya Sutta, when one develops the perception of impermanence or uncertainty, this leads to insight into anatta, into not self. That everything that we think of as ourselves, if it's all uncertain and empty and changing, then that directly supports and leads to the insight into anatta, into not self. And in that insight, then the heart is freed from the conceit of identity, what's called asmimana. So, and the Buddha then said in that same little expression, and when the heart is free from asmimana, from that conceit, this is nibbana, here and now. So right there, by developing the quality of anicca, the perception of anicca, that leads to a direct insight into anatta. There's a letting go of the self-centered habits, and when the heart is free of those, then what is experienced is true peacefulness. As he said, this is nibbana, here and now. So that's the Meghiya Sutta, which is also another wonderful collection of teachings. So these are a few themes following up on the Anapanasati Sutta, and of course, as I said, you could spend a week just on that one sutta, or even just different aspects of it. But I feel it's most helpful to see how we can take these principles and bring them to life, moment by moment, day by day. And that when we talk about vipassana, you might say, well, I want to go, I like to practice vipassana, and we think of it as sitting down with our eyes closed on a cushion or being on a retreat. But there's the vipassana, which is the method of, say, being on a retreat, or developing the recollections of anicca, dukkha, anatta, of uncertainty, of unsatisfactoriness and of not self. But it's also important to recognize that there's the vipassana, which is the method, the thing that you do, like applying those reflections or working in that way. There's also the vipassana that's the change of heart. Like when that method is applied, then it's what happens inside you that changes it. Oh, it's not self. Oh, that's not really mine. This doesn't really have an owner. Ah, and that in a way the real vipassana is that change of heart, that freedom of heart that comes in that moment of clear seeing. And that doesn't have to be on the cushion. It doesn't have to be on a meditation retreat. It can be just as you're approaching the traffic lights, or as we found today when the traffic lights were approaching us. It was an interesting moment in Haifa, the guy with the traffic light on his shoulder. As we came towards the intersection. And so that it's in this way we can see that it's not just in a quiet or a protected or a sterile situation that we can have genuine insight, but if we remember to apply this kind of reflection, we look at our experience in this way, moment by moment. If we remember to do that day by day, then we find that there's that same change of heart, that same quality of liberation can be right there, just in the middle of a traffic intersection. It can be just over the breakfast table with your family. It can be when you're brushing your teeth. There's no pattern of perception that is required for that insight to arise, but rather it can be born in all the different varieties of circumstance that we experience during the day. So I've spoken for about an hour now, and one of the things I thought I'd like to, as we go into the time for discussion, is to ask you all, the other evening I put out these suggestions about living according to the 5 precepts, was number 1. And number 2 was the micro meditations, to put that into practice somewhat. And then the third one was to be seeing if you could bracket your day with that quality of reflection before and after. So I'm curious as to what experiences people have had, or difficulties, or delights from trying to apply or putting those suggestions into action. I'm not looking for a report, but just having made those suggestions, to ask how that's been working for people, or particular difficulties or surprises or things that were useful in that. Yes.
I've had an interesting experience today. I encountered a very big injustice done to someone who works near the university. And it made me really furious. It was like picking up on the weakest and smallest. And I immediately noticed my reaction and my tendency to make things just, and to put everyone in their place, and to fight the fight of the weak, but I actually managed to see it happen. And then I thought, wait, don't do that. And then I told myself, okay, choose between the response and the reaction. I mean, what can you actually do practically that can handle this? And then think about the emotions. Is it really necessary? And then I remembered the metaphor of the rock, which I really like. So, am I choosing to pick up the rock? Is it necessary to pick up the rock? Do I want to pick up the rock? And I said, no, I really don't need that rock. And then I noticed my sense of responsibility. I remembered your story about you and yourself and the other monk. And I could visualize it and see how I immediately say, yes, let's do something about it and take the responsibility onto myself. And yet, the tendency to pick up the rock was there. And I was finding myself, telling myself, step away from the rock. Do not pick up the rock. And it was like this the entire morning. It was back and forth. And around 2 p.m., I was with the rock on my shoulders all the way. And it was like this for several hours. And so I ended up picking up the rock. It was like a millisecond in which I missed it. I noticed the process.
Well, that's the main thing, is that even when you picked it up, just as I was saying yesterday, just to let yourself be fully conscious of, okay, I picked that up. How does it feel? And with as little sort of blaming or complaining or explaining, just let it be felt. Okay, now I picked that one up. How does it feel? And then just letting yourself know that. And again, with as little, the more we can minimize the commentary, the more that just sinks right in. Like, I didn't really need to do this, and this is why I didn't need to do it, because it feels like this, and then that helps it to sink in. So we learn the lesson. Even when we've lost it, we got carried away by something, then we learn the lesson from that. When the mind going, I said I wasn't going to do this again, I just did it again. And even though I said I wasn't going to, even though I know, and I'm describing the fact that I'm doing it again, I'm still doing it again. I'm getting, you can have those little inner commentaries, and you just can't stop that hand reaching for the cookie jar or whatever. And that, but then just to be able to follow that and see, okay, well that's now being grasped. Okay, now what's the result of that? How does this feel? Yeah, I feel miserable and regretful and exhausted. And, right. And then Just letting that be known, and then that has tremendous strength to then, as the hand reaches the next step, I know where this goes. And it's that much easier to not be drawn in the same way. Yes?
And I was surprised how much 5 seconds can be such a long time sometimes.
It is surprising, isn't it? And you've got lots of those in the day. Huge numbers of those every day. Yes.
Actually, it's the first time that I'm doing a city retreat, and before coming, I thought to myself, what is this city retreat? You sit for a few hours and then you go to your everyday life. But actually, I really feel how beneficial it is for me. And because I go home and I go to my everyday duties, either with the family, either with my work, and I feel differently facing that, as if whatever we do here is filling my heart and my being with different, I don't know how to say, point of view, no point of view, feeling, different feeling to whatever is surrounding me. For me, this thing is fantastic. It's very fantastic. I could see it in a personal point of view with my family. There is now a certain duty that I have to take on myself regarding my family. And I could see actually very brightly what I'm doing. And I'm doing that for quite a while, and I haven't noticed it so sharply. And after doing this city retreat, I felt that my eyes are getting a little bit brighter, wider, and I could see a wider picture. And it helped me so much, just like that, helped me so much to do a very profound change, just like that.
Very good. Yes. You're the same person who was sitting over there? I can see you look just like her.
I really enjoy the mini meditations, the 5 seconds, because it brings you back to the present moment. Usually when everything I do, time flies by, and I always think back, what did I do today? But stopping just brings you back to the moment, and then you can do better choices, better decisions, what to do next, and how to do the things you need to do.
Yeah, and it's surprising how simple. Just giving yourself just... and the whole world reshapes itself.
And also, I got an unpleasant text from someone, someone unpleasant. But because I reflected the further meditations and how I react to it, I decided not to read it immediately. And when I come down, and I said, okay, now I will read it. And my response was different, because I was ready for it. So I want to thank you.
Very good. Yes.
I find I'm a mother to a 4-year-old, and I think it's a huge challenge for me. Well, I have the tendency to critique myself a lot, and I see it more with my son. because there's a lot of like controlling fights. He's in this age, he wants to do things his way. Also his father and I broke up a few months ago, and I think there's a lot going on around that. And I see more, I think, thanks to the practice, I see more the thoughts going on, like many times. Sometimes if he cries for, let's say, 20 minutes, or about going to the bathroom, he's tired, he doesn't want to, and then he starts fighting really hard. And then I realize how I become the fight too. I'm like becoming like him, you know? I'm becoming a controlling thing instead of like zooming out and being able to see the situation and I realize the more I become that, then it's becoming more and more stressful. When I'm able to kind of stay calm and say, okay, well, what's my, you know, I have a role here. And it's really hard because with him I realize how quickly I become very reactive. And like after things like that happen, like yesterday I was late because he wouldn't say goodbye. We got into that, and I realized how quickly I'm like, oh my God, how I reacted. You know, I'm a bad mother. I'm scarring him for life. I wasn't enough empathetic. I wasn't that. On the other end, I want to put enough borders and make him know, you know, like especially with like, I want him to know the Buddhist way of life from like age 4. You cannot get everything you want. There's a Nietzsche, and you know, it's like and yeah, it was like yesterday I got so entangled in it, and suddenly, and I was so scared of being late. I didn't want to be late, and then I realized, oh, also, what will people think of me, and you know, and I don't want to be disrespectful, and it's really important for me, and I realized, okay, well, I might not be able to come, and then I picked up the phone and called To, and then I started crying because she's so calming, and she was like, that's okay, take your time and come, and it really helped me to do that, you know, zoom out and see him in that. He was in a, like, you know, he was being like stressed for my living, and it's, I really find it difficult to do it there, you know. But yeah, and it is a big challenge, not just him, but that afterwards, not to tell myself, wow, this is so bad, and then I find the practice helped me to say, well, it doesn't matter. It's like, what can you do now?
Yeah, that's it.
How to improve it now?
Because I'm not a child psychologist, but observing how things work in the world, children learn by example. So you wouldn't believe the number of times that people come along with their child and they say, can you tell him that he should be like this, or she should be like that, and they should. So they, you know, as a sort of religious figure, you get people expect you to be able to fix their child or their parents, and so more often than not, what I say was, if your child's got anger issues, the child is very impatient and angry, and so it's important to recognize that you as a parent, you know, that you can model non-anger. That's what one of the things you can offer is that when you would like to, when you feel like you want to get angry, to recognize, well, I'm setting an example. It's not just my feeling, but I'm setting an example in the home. So let's look at that. And so, 9 times out of 10, if not more, the parent goes, no. So looking at the floor because they, oh yes, right. And that there's not seeing that their children are they're so deeply affected by the mood and the manner that the family has, particularly the parents and particularly the mother. So not to put more emotional pressure on you, but just to see that if we want our children to develop those particular qualities, like if you're uptight about wanting your child to be Buddhist, it's not going to work. It's like, so rather than explaining Buddhism, we have to embody it, and that it's more helpful if you recognize, okay, here's a really good opportunity to not lose my temper. Okay, let's see if we can do that, and that has such a profound effect. I mean, it's so much more helpful than that sense of the way the mind justifies things. Well, that's just me, or they have to get used to that, or it doesn't really matter. But just to see that the children are like sponges, and that they soak up what's around them, and so that if you put a particular attention on that, to see how mum doesn't get angry, even when I really push her, then that has a very wonderful effect, and also when you get your kids very quickly saying, "You're not supposed to be angry, Mum. You're a Buddhist." You know, I'll call you on it. But to be able to say thank you, to your kid, thank you, Ajahn. And in all seriousness, there was when I was living in the States, I go to this summer camp every year at Spirit Rock Buddhist Center, and they'd have a family event every summer. And at the end of the family camp, we'd have this asking for forgiveness ceremony between the parents and the children. And so that it's a thing that we do in the monastery, where when you've been, say, spending the rains retreat together, or you've been living in the same place for some time, when you're parting company, you would say to the teacher, whatever I've done by body, speech, or mind that's been hurtful or obstructive or difficult, whether it was intentional or unintentional, I ask your forgiveness. And then the teacher says, I forgive you, and please forgive me also for anything that I have done. And so we just sort of conjured that up. We created a version between parents and children. It's quite a wonderful thing, seeing these sort of 40-year-old California parents saying to their 3-year-old, "Please forgive me for anything I've done that's been hurtful for you." And then the little 3-year-old saying, "I forgive you, Dad. Please forgive me too." And it's it's fun. But it's also a serious exchange that's sort of there across the generation, and that recognizing that we do blow it, we do have faults, but also that we can make the effort to do better in the future. But I think just to recollect that children learn by example, and there's having that, not to make you feel more guilty, but more just as something to in a sense, get really to let that into the heart, to help inform the way you relate. Because even if you can't explain things, or you're not in a good mood, just to be able to say, I'm in a bit of a cranky mood now, so I think I better not say anything, because I'm feeling upset and cranky, and just that. To take responsibility for the moods that are there, rather than just acting them out. Then even for a young child, they'll say, "Don't worry, Mum, it'll get better. Do you want some milk?" Yes.
said, I think, in the first evening about the fact that we all have the 7 factors of enlightenment built in us, and we maybe forgot it, or we redevelop it in our life. I was just thinking today about the fact that these qualities are achieved slowly in each one of them in our on our way, and but as well as the regressive of each one of them, the regressive state, and that's a nature for your presence in each one of the factors. And for me, my experience now is in all of them is a regressive. So
All of them?
yeah, all the pack. So it just made me wonder about the permanent or impermanent of these qualities.
Well, what I would, there's different ways of looking at it, but I would say that it's often because the things that are obstructing them are getting stronger. Like what I was talking about last night, the 5 hindrances, the mind is becoming dull or becoming caught up in habits of negativity, but then those qualities of the enlightened mind are more being covered up or obscured, and so that just like tending a fire, looking after a fire, it's a dynamic thing. The potential, the energy is there, so within the wood already, but depending on how you look after the fire, then it can burn effectively or not. And so that if you're experiencing that things, all those qualities are sort of disappearing or becoming weaker, then it can be helpful to look at those 5 hindrances and see the things that are covering them up. And so yesterday evening I was talking a little bit about the ways of working with each of those. So if the mind is moving towards more and more negativity, or is getting sort of critical and complaining, and then to see, the mind is developing a strong habit of negativity. Okay, let's look at the quality of loving kindness and see if we can bring that acceptance, consciously cultivate that loving kindness to counteract the ill will that's obstructing and damping down the factors of enlightenment. Or if there's a lot of restlessness, wanting to be busy and active and not being just I'm not reading your mind or just sort of using random examples, but if you say that you're experiencing a lot of restlessness, then to say, okay, well, I'm getting really distracted and caught up in things just because of basic agitation. So let's take a look at that and see if I can reduce that agitation and support the quality of tranquility and ease, and using consciously developing a mindfulness of the body, trying to notice, or where do I hold that feeling of stress or tension in my body? Can I relax that? Can I let myself be more settled? Just sitting in the car, or sitting at your desk, or sitting in your home, can I feel the presence of the body? Where am I tensing up against things? Where's the stress in the body? Can I relax that? So just in small areas here and there where you see particular obstructions or difficulties, just aiming at one particular thing. Often just making a project for the day or for a week. Okay, this week I'm going to look at restlessness and just make that my week's project. Now, I've done this before, and it really can be quite useful. Just at the beginning of the day, say, okay, this week's program today. Whenever I find myself getting restless or agitated, or whether the mind's moving towards negativity, whatever, just choose a theme, and then set that as your project for the day. And then whenever you find the mind moving in that direction, then okay, there it goes again. Now, how am I relating to this? Now, what caused that? How is this made? And then by looking at it and feeling it, then you find that your mind is less dominated, carried away by those.
Yeah, I can point feeling of frustrating because it's, I will call it on the first round, but in first I achieved those qualities. I thought I already owned them, and then see them fade away
there's an erosion problem.
It's like harder to no, I'm already in, maybe it's, I read Ajahn Amaro saying last week, something that, I read it last week, about grasping about attached to your achievement. So I can see it, but still harder frustrating to do it again.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I was giving the example the other day about I'm not sure whether it was here or in a different conversation. I think it was at Eitan's home. I was reading this interview with Andrei Segovia, the guitarist. And he was in his 90s. He was like over 90 years old when they were doing this interview. And the interviewer asked him, so you're over 90 years old now, and you're the world's leading guitarist. Classical guitar is built around your own sort of skills, creativity. Do you still feel the need to practice the guitar? And he says, oh yes, I still practice. And then the interviewer said he kind of blushed. He kind of went red and looked down at the table and said, well, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I only practice 6 hours a day now. It used to be a minimum of 9, but I only do 6 hours a day. He's like 93 years old, and he's sort of embarrassed that he's not really fulfilling what's appropriate. And so I think it's a lot to do with the way we attach to ideas, that when we know about something, we think that we know it, that we sort of know the whole thing, like, okay, all things are impermanent, okay, got that, right, good, easy. What's next? Okay, not self, well, that's a little bit harder. And so knowing the concept is one thing, but knowing it bone deep is a whole different story. And our culture reveres that knowing about so much that we miss the fact that we don't really know it at a bone deep level, and think, well, I understood that. How come? I totally had it last week, and I thought I can't have got lost because I understood that. But it's really important to recognize the difference between knowing about and really knowing. Just with that example of impermanence, it's like that if you one of the definitions of stream entry, like the mind reaching a level of insight that's sort of irreversible and liberating insight, it sort of guarantees full enlightenment. That one of the characteristics of that is recognizing impermanence. If you really know impermanence, then it's virtually the same as having entered the stream. What? Well, that's easy. I mean, all things are impermanent. I believe that. Okay, that mean I'm a stream enterer. But so it can seem that the knowledge about it is one thing, but the actuality is another. Like you see over and over again in the scriptures, like in the very first discourse, the Dhammacakka Sutta, when Kandanya hears the Buddha describing the Four Noble Truths in the middle way, and then the insight that arises is Yankinchi samudaya dhammang sabantang nirodha damanti. Whatever is subject to arising is subject to ceasing. All that begins ends. That's the big insight. and it is, but it's like, well, a 3-year-old could kind of understand that. But it's like, when you really, all that arises passes away. And then what really knows the full implications of that, and if we really knew that, then every success, we would never feast on it or grasp it. Every failure, we would not be broken-hearted. It just changes the whole way we deal with praise and criticism, success and failure, gain and loss, beginnings and endings, birth and death. It reconfigures the whole map. But when you spell it out, whatever arises passes away. It's not intellectually demanding. Like your 4-year-old, you get that. Like, what goes up must come down. But to really get it, it's like, that's when the Buddha realized Kandanya had seen that, then the Buddha said, Kandanya understands, he understands. That he got really carried away for a moment there. He was excited, like, wow, Kandanya understands. Anyasi watabo Kandanyo. Kandanya understands. And but it's so simple to articulate it. So it's important to catch that when we think, well, I understand that. Like, is that so? Is that a sure thing? And to use that, well, let's take a look closer, and just in using that way of holding it, like, well, I know about it, but do I really know it? Like, I know that Hebrew language exists, but I can't speak it. I can't understand a word of it. I know the language exists. It's there, yes, but I can't understand it.
Yeah. Talked about ownership. I can understand we don't have ownership over the body or the thoughts or the emotions, but we have responsibility to it. So what is the responsibilities also can tie you down. I'm somewhat responsible for my thoughts, no? Okay. Even if I don't have ownership to it. What is the relationship between ownership and responsibility? No one else is going to be responsible for my thoughts.
It's a good question. Well, it's in a way it's most helpful to see, yes, there is a responsibility, but when you look for, well, what is it, or who is it that's responsible, then you can't find what that who is. So, and it's the same with decision making. The choices that are made, even though we can notice a sound in the street. Well, that's not my sound. It's the experience of sound arising and passing away, or a thought in our mind. Well, that's not really mine either. It just arises and passes away. But when it gets to a choice that we make, it really feels like there's some person who's choosing. But when we deconstruct that, and in the same way with responsibility, then what there's say the perception of a particular situation. You see the people that are present. You hear you hear the words being said. You discern the issues that are are involved. So there's perception, there's thinking, drawing upon past experience, there's memory. So perception is not self, thinking is not self, memory is not self. And then there's the application of mindfulness and wisdom, sati panya, that then explores that. Well, that having been said, that being within the memory banks, then these are the possibilities that present themselves of responding by saying something or addressing things in a particular way. What will be the response that will be of most benefit? Then the more clear and attuned that mindfulness and wisdom is, and the more what will arise will be appropriate advice or response. So it feels like I'm choosing particular words to say to you in response, in my responsibility of being invited to teach here and give reasonable answers that don't confuse or create more suffering. It feels like I am choosing these words, but the more I get out of the way, then the more the appropriate words appear. That's why it's called a Dhamma talk is actually called a Dhamma desana. It's a demonstration of Dhamma. And often when we give a Dhamma talk, you recite this little verse that says, Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. I pay my respects to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So ideally, it's just the Dhamma speaking itself, rather than me, of a person, sort of saying this is my thoughts or my ideas, or I am telling you. So there's the responsibility is that there is going to be a degree of attachment or identification with the things that are done, and also there's going to be the way the world judges it. That the world says, Ajahn Amaro is saying these words, and it's recorded. You've got a little camera going there. It's saying, Ajahn Amaro said these words, he can be quoted on it. And so that's the convention, is saying this is Ajahn Amaro speaking. But when I look for the essential Ajahn Amaro, you can't define what that is. So that the world says, no, this is you, this is your passport number, this is your social security, this is who you are, this is when you're born, this is your identity. But the mind can still recognize, well, these are just convenient fictions, and that if that genuinely comes from a place of wisdom and attunement, then that's always going to be in accord with what's wholesome and beneficial and noble. If it's distorted by self-view, then or of preference, then it's going to be bias. So then there'll be I'll take responsibility when it's praise and gain, but when it's criticism and loss, then it's your problem. You understand? Yeah. It's called the selective non-attachment. It's a popular spiritual sport. It's also called spiritual bypassing. Like really, it's spiritual bypassing where it's like misusing the teachings on emptiness or selflessness to avoid responsibility. Like, not me, not mine. You can do the dishes, as Ram Dass would put it. We're all one, you do the dishes. That's called ignorance. But it's very, very common that when we're into non-duality and non-attachment, when it's me conventionally gaining what I like, but when it's me having to deal with something I don't like, or being burdened with something that's unpleasant or unwanted, then we try to play that the emptiness card. And so that's a very dangerous and painful kind of delusion, because we can get away with that a certain amount of time, but sooner or later, crunch, things come home. And so that it's like that selective non-duality. It's another way of describing it. So it's like, it's the responsibility, if you like, is to let that attunement be as complete and unbiased as possible. So there's a surrender in that, like a self-surrender of laying aside the habits of preference and liking and disliking, and being ready to respond to the moment without those kinds of distortions. So from the outside, yes, you are responsible, but the way that the mind holds that me that is responsible is different from how it's held from a worldly perspective. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's good. But it's also, if you explore it in terms of decision making and choices, it's because it's in a way that's the area where it most feels like there's a me. It's my exploring of it. That when there really feels like there's a me who owns this experience, or a me who's responsible, or me who's made that particular decision, choice. And the law says, you done it. You know, the common sense and human relationships and the laws of every country on the planet says, you did it, you're responsible. You might talk about not self, but you're going in the slammer. Because regardless of, well, all dhammas are not self, officer.
There's definitely an observer.
Well, there's an observing. But I would say it's a mistake to say there's an observer. I was thinking, actually, it's a whole area I was considering talking about tomorrow. We've got the long afternoon session tomorrow. So this whole area was something I was considering be useful to talk about. And how, because in terms of vipassana, often when people are describing insight meditation, they talk about being the watcher, or being the silent witness, or being the observer. And so that the encouragement is being the observer of experience and watching it coming and going and changing. And so that then in that, even though it can be an effective tool in some respects, what it can do is it can create a subtle sense of me, the observer. It doesn't have it's not male or female, or old or young, or tall or short, but there's an I-ness, ahankara, I am, the feeling of I am, or mamankara, the feeling of mindness. Ahankara, mamankara. Even though it's not associated with a body or a personality or a memory, it's just in a way the disincarnate, the non-formed I that's the experiencer, and that's the conceit of I am is can be unconsciously being fed and made stronger by I, the observer. Even though I watching thoughts and feelings pass away, that are not me, not mine, but then you can be unconsciously making that feeling of me, the observer, like the video camera, stronger. And so that, and also it can create a false kind of abstraction. So that if we do that in the meditation, then we start finding ourselves trying to do that in our life. Like if you're sitting across the breakfast table, trying to be unattached, it can drive your family nuts. You're doing your non-attachment thing. The kids will start throwing cornflakes at you. Dad, hello. He's doing that Buddhist thing again. Oh no. Can you stop being Buddhist and just be Dad, please? Because it can come from that sense of I'm just observing. I'm just watching. I'm not getting caught up. So that's the very reason I prefer to use terms like unentangled participating, so that we're engaging. There's an engaging with the world, with thoughts, with feelings, with choices, with those responsibilities. That there's a receiving of them, a participating in them, but without being caught up, without being entangled. Because I found that when we talk in terms of being the observer or the watcher or the silent witness or the one who knows, that it can create this false kind of abstraction that in a strange way feeds the sense of I. And also makes us out of tune with our responsibilities. You know, and I use that example of the breakfast table because there was this very dear fellow in one of the local Buddhist groups in England who one day said to me, you know, Ajahn, I'm having real trouble, you know, trying to practice at home. And I said, well, what do you mean, frankly? He said, well, yeah, my kids, my wife and kids, they're really giving me a bad time. I think, oh dear. You know. I said, well, what do you mean they give you a bad time? He said, well, look, I'm trying to eat my breakfast mindfully. You know. And you know, there I am. I'm trying to eat my breakfast mindfully. You know, and you could just sort of see him moving in slow motion with the cornflakes. You know, moving, lifting. And his kids are saying, like, Dad, come on, we've got to get to school. What are you doing? You know, wait, please stop doing that stupid Buddhist thing, Dad. Like, just eat your cornflakes. But he's sincerely trying to do the right thing, and trying to observe and to be mindful. But then that has been disconnected with the time, the place, the situation, and that feeling of a sort of disconnected watcher is being very, very careful about everything, is being named as mindfulness. Where what would be more helpful would be like, well, my kids need to get to school, and my wife is not interested in Buddhism. I'll just pretend to be Dad at breakfast, and be mindful of the feeling of being Dad at breakfast, and do the thing of the family, and not make an issue of it. And that would be the most mindful, I would suggest, thing to be doing, rather than making the mindfulness a sort of extra member of the family at the breakfast table. You know, the other, the invisible other that's intruding on the family scene. And so that's what I was saying about bracketing the day, just like, okay, let the day begin, rather than trying to be mindful while you're doing breakfast, or be mindful at the business meeting, or be mindful during the chanting. And as soon as I try to be mindful during the chanting, I forget the words. It's a common experience. As soon as you're the only one who's got to lead it, even though you know the words very, very well, you probably find that. As soon as you're the one who's got to lead it. How does it begin? Oh, yo so, you know. You've been doing it for 30 years or more, and then suddenly you've got to do it, and you want to get it right, and you're trying to do it perfectly, and then it disappears. But if you just let go of it, then it's all right there. It's our friend in the corner again.
Yeah, well, I have several questions, but I focus on one.
It's 10 to 10, so this
is... One.
I'm not very good at short answers, you might have noticed.
I wanted to ask about insight. I don't know, from my experience, from my practice, as you said, it's very easy to understand these concepts conceptually, intellectually, but it's there's a inner resistance to let go of the ego, to let go of external support system. And I came to the conclusion that I need some inner refuge, inner emotional refuge, in order to gain these insights. And I found it in the places, generally in the sukha and the deep absorptions and in metta. But otherwise, I don't understand how you can actually gain insight. I mean, it's not just the knowledge on the cognitive level. Are there other ways to approach it?
Yeah, well, the short answer is yes. There's a whole... there are different methods of liberation. So panya-vimutti, liberation through wisdom, is one such method, which is mostly what the kind of approach I've been describing, and the development of insight would come under the heading of liberation through wisdom. But also through the development of concentration, ceto vimutti, and developing those sort of deep and blissful states of mind, liberation through the training of the heart. There's also saddha vimutti, the liberation through faith. So just through devotional practice. Panya vimutti is the quickest. For those of us who haven't got very much time. Saddha vimutti is regarded as, it's not spoken of so often, but it's regarded as being much slower. But and ceto vimutti is also not quite as quick as panya vimutti, but it also has the sort of side effects that different kinds of mental abilities can arise from deep concentration as well. But in terms of feeding the inner life and the emotional nature, then the quality of saddha or faith and developing a devotional practice is also can be very, very important and very helpful for people as well. So just something like having a shrine in your home, just putting, we have these several shrines in your home, picking up frangipani flowers and offering them up as a devotional.
But again, when you talk about wisdom, in the West we talk usually about wisdom as knowledge, as intellectual understanding or judgment, but it's not the same thing. I mean, you can be very wise in Western terms, but don't understand at all or can't cope with impermanence and dukkha and non-self. Actually, it's usually the opposite. People who are very wise have huge ego a lot of times. So, again, could you elaborate on this? What do you mean by wisdom when you say that it can bring to insight in the Buddhist wisdom?
Well, the wisdom is not the same as information. It's like that from the T.S. Eliot poem. Where is the wisdom that is lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge that is lost in information? So wisdom is more, from the Buddhist perspective, it's not information and it's not even knowledge. It's a way of seeing. So that wisdom is that moment by moment recognition that all things are empty. All things are uncertain. All things are not self. All things cannot permanently satisfy. And not just remembering the words of, but the way of seeing. So that in a way, the use of the word wisdom for the Pali word panya is maybe not perfect. Because the English word wisdom tends to imply knowing about, because I was saying to our friend over here, and it's not knowing about, it's the way of seeing. So it's seeing into the very nature of experience itself. And in that seeing, there's that freeing of the heart. So you can have people who are extremely wise who have virtually no worldly knowledge whatsoever, and also very good abilities to concentrate. So it's more to do with a mode of vision, a mode of seeing, rather than information or facts or ideas or even the ability to articulate. Like Ajahn Chah's teacher, Ajahn Man, was a brilliant speaker and extremely gifted. But his teacher, Ajahn Sao, was completely inarticulate. He was unable to give Dhamma talks at all. So they say in the local stories in the area of northeast Thailand where he was from, the Kongjiam area in Ubon, it said sometimes Ajahn Sao would get up on the Dhamma seat and he'd say, being good is good. That's the Dhamma talk. That's all he had to say. I'm like, okay, that's it. Have a good evening.
You'll be kicked out in Tel Aviv.
Well, I would like to suggest if wisdom is a hard way for you, why don't you do some bhakti, some washing dishes, stay afterwards, picking up everything, washing a little bit, doing things that other people are doing. Yes, but this goes through the body, not through intellect.
No, it's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking, perhaps, if I feel the reason, at least for me, I think for many people, is that we have hard time letting go because it gives us some emotional support. The things that we are hanging on to, these attachments. We have some payoff for this. It's not arbitrary, because otherwise, the moment we will realize that it causes suffering, we will let go. But it's not like this. And what I'm asking is, we need to develop another inner emotional refuge, or we get to a point when, I don't know, it's like we are birds. We don't have to land on anything. We don't have to stand on anything. I'm not sure if I explained myself correctly.
Yeah, I think so. Well, there's this kind of phrase that they, like a saying, a motto that you have in the forest tradition, which is the suffering that leads to the end of suffering. And so, when you are you're engaging in spiritual training, there's a lot of the experience of loss. All of that stuff that you think that you have, your wonderful ideas and your plans and your memories and your self-image, there's a lot of loss. And so that losing and that which is often felt as a friction, like an abrasion in your heart, that is seen as that's the main engine of transformation. Let that losing, that letting go, that ending, and so that's a painful feeling. But by consciously entering into that and recognizing, it's like going into a weight loss program. I'm doing this to lose, to be less. That's the point of it. So you know that's what you're doing. You know that's what you want, but you also know this is going to hurt. So that, or like going on a hike through the Himalayas, it's really going to hurt, but you do it. But you know that's what's part of the process. So that you're, in a sense, it's a mixture of faith, of your own intuition of I don't need to hang on to this. Most of me knows I don't need to hang on to this, but I can't. Something stopped me from letting go. And so that faith that yeah, it is possible to let this stuff go, and if I do, things are going to be a lot better. So there's a confidence that that's how it works, even though it's not tangible or apparent. There's a trust or a confidence that yeah, if I let go of this, if I lose this, if I drop this, things are going to be much better. And then there's the quality of patience, staying with that experience of loss or abrasion, and it's also just like being in a relationship. There's a lot of giving up, of letting go, of making way for the other. And I've never been married, at least not in this lifetime, but I've lived in community for the last 36 years, so I know how to let go of opinions, and so that. But so you're applying patience, you're applying faith, and also resolution. Like you've made a commitment, so you're going to stay with it, even when the things are difficult or testing. So, well, I've made a commitment. Let's stay with this. Again, like a relationship or a marriage, or that you've undertaken a program. You're supposed to be looking after these students. It's your job. You've got a responsibility. So that then that adhitthana, or resolution, is also a large part of that. So there's a great beauty when you live with those values, even though it can seem like it's hard work and a lot of pain and loss. That when the heart is committed to a resolution, or is committed to be patient, or is guided by confidence, of faith, there's an incredible brightness and a strength within that is a powerful emotional presence. But it's all it's work.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay.
But that's if you are expecting, in a way, we should be expecting that sense of losing, because what you're trying to do in terms of spiritual development is challenging the self-centered habits of a lifetime.
I experience very strongly the losing. I'm just asking myself sometimes, what am I gaining? I mean,
Well, you're not gaining anything.
Not gaining in the no. What is my refuge? This is what it is.
Well, that's where as those things that I think I own or I am fall away, then what is real, what is reliable, is what's revealed. So the refuge is Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and not just the Buddha as a sort of a statue, but Buddha is that quality of awakenedness. We take refuge in the Buddha, it means I choose to be awake rather than to be snoozing through life. I'm choosing to be wise, to be awake, to know. To take refuge in Dhamma isn't just trusting the words of the suttas, but it's trusting the way things are rather than the way I would like them to be, or I think they should be, or the way they used to be, but the way life actually is, the way nature works. So taking refuge in Dhamma is a fundamental realism